Today, we're going to be talking about the Crimson Corsair, a fearsome pirate whose story bridges the sequel and prequel trilogies in a very interesting way. Let's get into it. The Crimson Corsair, Blood Buccaneer, Red Raider, Silent Scourge of the Lost Clusters. When you take all the reputations and all of these monikers together, you get the fearsome Sidon Ithano, a Delphidian pirate who wandered the Outer Rim for decades after the fall of the Galactic Empire. The Delphidian are a mysterious people from the edges of wild space. They have leathery gray skin, but otherwise vary wildly from one member of the species to another. There is some speculation that their species had a long-lost common ancestor and evolution had taken them all in radically different directions, or if they were created to be a slave force and found freedom decades before. Ithano wore red robes and a unique red Kaleesh mask to hide his identity. The Kaleesh, or Kaleeshi, were a snake-like bipedal species from the world Kalee in wild space. They're cold and brutal people with a reputation as ruthless warriors. The most famous Kaleesh is none other than General Grievous, the infamous separatist general of the Clone Wars and nemesis to Obi-Wan Kenobi. If I could bring the Kaleesh mask tangent just one level deeper, the portrayal of Ithano has him wearing a red helmet with winged sides and large eyes. The Kaleesh mask is supposed to be made of bones of Kalee's deadliest creatures, the Mamu, the Urkush, and the Karabak. The helmet does take some design inspiration from the more rustic Kaleesh war masks with the red coloring, long vertical slit eyes, and lack of nose, but it's not quite the same thing. The secret identity and plethora of names that would strike fear into the hearts of Outer Rim spacers and settlers helped Ithano become a near mythical figure among pirates. It's said that any of his names would only be talked about in whispers in the darkest corners of the most off-the-beaten-path cantinas. If Ithano's ship bore down on you, you would know your fate was sealed when an eerie voice came across your comms saying, "Lower your shields and come about." Looking into Ithano's past, it's unsurprising he garnered the reputation he eventually would. He started his pirate career serving aboard the New Gilliand under the Weequay captain Scorza. Scorza taught him an early lesson on not trusting pirates when he sold his entire crew out to the Hutts. The New Gilliand was destroyed and most of the crew murdered. Ithano, of course, survived. He didn't want to be in such a low and vulnerable position ever again. He began to piece together the resources and manpower to assemble his own outlaw pirate crew. His crew consisted of First Mate Quiggold, a male Gaborian, ship mechanic Revith, a female Twi'lek, Squeaky, a male Gamorrean, Pendukel, or Pen, a male Ishi Tib, Rig Brosna, a male Arcona, and eventually latecomer Kix, the last clone trooper from the Grand Army of the Republic. Reading about Kix for this small entry got him in line to be the next transmission I'll be researching, writing, and recording. Check back for that awesome story. The crew traveled on a heavily modified CSS-1 Carillion Star Shuttle manufactured by Carillion Engineering Corporation. The ship was called the Mason Martinet, or Martinet, though I couldn't nail down as to what the namesake actually may be or who named the ship. Ithano and his crew did more than pillage. He fought in many battles in the Outer Rim, including the infamous battle at Adrathrep 7. There are virtually no details on this skirmish other than it cemented Ithano's reputation as the most feared pirate in the Outer Rim and got him a new nickname, the Scorer of Adrathrep 7. I'm probably saying that wrong, apologies. After another day of pirating, the crew are kicked back in a cantina, and they stumble into something special, a 50-year-old transmission from the Clone Wars. A B-1 battle droid reported a Confederate ship, the Abrexta 3, had gone down in the Sea of Sand on the desert world of Panoma. Aboard the Abrexta was a shipment of precious and increasingly rare kyber crystals that once belonged to the Jedi Order and was then claimed by Count Dooku. Ithano and his crew knew they had to brave this deadly region of space and dig up the past of the Clone Wars. Panoma was not just a desert planet, but one embroiled in constant deadly storms. If dodging lightning strikes from the sky and magma eruptions from the planet's surface wasn't enough, the Weequay Scorza and his latest crew were hot in pursuit. Scorza fires on Ithano's sandskiff. Their ship couldn't weather the unique storms on the planet, and Brosna is knocked off. In traditional pirate fashion, Ithano uses grappling hooks to anchor Scorza's skiff to his own. The fight goes from range to close quarters as blasters, small explosives, and vibroblades are wielded. The elements take out more fighters than the raging battle. Scorza mocks Ithano, who's always up for proving his reputation was warranted. The two have an intense duel with vibro swords. Scorza is defeated and cast off the ship into the storm presumably ending him. Quiggold fires a kinetic disruptor torpedo to freeze the sandstorm, which allows Ithano's crew to get back on track in finding their treasure. When they get to the wrecked Abrexta 3, they discover other treasure hunters, gangs, and pirates had already been in pursuit of this very same treasure. A whole group of the Fangs of the Hutt are dead due to noxious fumes emanating somewhere deep within the wreckage. Ithano and his crew take the warning seriously and wear rebreathers. Walking through the haunting past of the Clone Wars brings the pirates to the location where they assumed the Kyber crystals would be. Instead of a priceless chest of old Jedi artifacts, they find a stasis pod. CT-6116, aka Kix, is inside where he's been sleeping, perfectly preserved, for 50 years. He was captured and stowed on this ship by Count Dooku himself. Kix's brain reels when he's awakened by the pirates. He knew of the plot against the Jedi and wanted to warn Jedi General Anakin Skywalker, which was decades too late. He also remembered all the intel from a war half a century in the past, as if it were yesterday. Ithano saw this as a great opportunity for further plunder. The crew, with Kix as their latest member, find leaving the Abrexta almost as hard as finding it in the first place. The ship itself crumbles all around them. Battle droids come back to life and get back to their primary function, war. Even Scorza shows up again, proving very difficult to kill, though Scorza doesn't amount to much this time around because he's gunned down by B-2 battle droids. Not really sure why it was important to bring him back again, but that's what happened. Finally making it to the airlock to disembark the old ship, they find their skiff has been destroyed by sandworms. Ithano orders his crew to the escape pods. There's only one left in working order and not everyone can fit. Ithano puts his crew above himself and volunteers to stay behind. The crew escapes, leaving their dreaded, but it turns out noble, at least in some respects, captain behind. A few weeks later, the crew, including Kix, are at their old watering hole. The experience has changed them as individuals, but losing their leader has left the dynamic of their small band in question. At that moment, Ithano walks through the doors, ever the imposing figure he had always been. Quiggold never lost hope that if anyone could survive everything they faced, it was the Crimson Corsair. Ithano had retrieved the memory core of the Abrexta 3. The information it contained, along with Kix's military intel of the day, give the crew countless separatist strongholds, bases, and storage caches to explore and plunder. When the subject of how the legendary pirate survived the ordeal, he simply states, "I do not die that easily." Always a man of few words. The already legendary pirate added to his reputation as he led his crew on raid after raid of separatist strongholds, facing down other pillagers, pirates, and separatist armies long forgotten about. The First Order, trying to get a hold of the galaxy, did their best to stamp down on the black markets where Ithano would fence most of their found loot. Changing gears, Ithano started to capture the very droids that were defending the loot. Ithano made a fortune selling super battle droids to other pirates, trying to carve out their own place in the tumultuous galaxy. Ithano and Quiggold made a stop at Takodana Castle, the fortress kept by Maz Kanata, where beings of almost all affiliations and backgrounds could meet to exchange goods or information. Or maybe just lay low for a while. A stormtrooper of the First Order who had defected offered to join the pirate crew in exchange for transport to the Outer Rim. Before FN-2187, or Finn as we know him, could board the Messin Martinet, the destruction of the Hosnian system was seen all around the galaxy. Then, the First Order arrived, throwing Finn on a different path that destiny, or the Force, held for him. Reality began to set in not long after this. The pirates' pockets were heavy with credits, but the shady parts of the galaxy where they could spend these credits was diminished by the two opposing governments and a new civil war. Even someone who had lived their life on the fringes, who came from wild space, who should have had zero interest in politics, realized the overreach of the First Order, like the empire that it was birthed from, had to be stopped. When the ragtag resistance put out an open call to all who would oppose tyranny, Ithano stepped up in a big way. He followed thousands of ships to Exegol to fight the Sith Eternal Fleet. He joined a ground-based strike team to take out a navigation tower which prevented the Sith fleet from jumping, wreaking havoc on the galaxy. The pirates even joined what would eventually be called the Citizens Fleet at the Resistance base on Aljan Kos to celebrate the newly liberated galaxy. This wasn't the crew turning over a new leaf, not by a long shot. After their celebration with the rest of the galaxy, they returned to terrorizing the Outer Rim. The Crimson Corsair's brutal and terrifying reputation never wavered. Sidon Ithano first appeared in The Force Awakens. I didn't really notice him despite his cool look until I was looking for lesser-heard Star Wars stories. I stumbled into The Lost Treasure of Count Dooku, a short story written for Star Wars Insider magazine in 2015, and something clicked. I always loved how deep every single side and background character from the original trilogy and then the prequels goes. I grew up on books like Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina. While those stories are now considered legends, the concepts are still cool, and so are a lot of the stories. Maz Kanata's castle could very well be the next source for seemingly insignificant characters to get some awesome stories told about them. For more short stories from a Star Wars Insider you may have missed, check out this transmission next.